Join me in a brief word of prayer. May the words of my mouth, the meditation of our hearts together be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, for you are our rock and our redeemer. We give you thanks and praise. Amen. Amen. And this morning's title is Sweat, from Luke 10:38 to 42. And what we see in last week's lectionary reading of the Good Samaritan, it asks the question, who is my neighbor? Knowing that we are called to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength, and all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Neighborliness has no bounds. And that our call as Christians are to do that work of justice in the world through being neighborly. That we are called to go and do likewise. Now, in this morning's gospel reading, it continues on the theme of discipleship. It continues the theme of discipleship from last week, and it adds on extra concern, an extra piece, the issue of hospitality. Now, Jesus has been welcomed into the home of Martha and Mary. Now, this is not Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, because Lazarus is not in this gospel reading. So, Mary and Martha are by themselves. Mary and Martha it's Martha's house. And Martha is doing what she believes is best in providing hospitality through table service, through diakonos, which is the word. And she is attempting kind of to create the proper atmosphere. She is trying to have the proper ambiance for the Lord. And I bet she is working hard trying to create this ambiance. She is sweating. I bet you her brow is dripping with perspiration, trying to get things right. But as she intently and intensely addresses Jesus, we see that she is sweating the small stuff. Now you've heard that phrase, don't sweat the small stuff, because it's all small stuff. But then she starts, and this is more of a term from my generation, she starts sweating on him. She starts sweating him on his back, saying she's bothering him about who is doing what. So we have this sweating in multiple ways. And Jesus is honing in on the response, on the issue. Because it's not a matter of who is doing what. It's a matter of Martha's anxiety. It's the anxiety of the triangle that's working between the three of them at that point, of Martha, Mary, and Jesus. It's the issue of conflict, and Martha is mad at Mary. So why is she talking to Jesus? This is her sister. You know her better than anybody else, and you have a better way to communicate with her better than Jesus ever could because of the relationship. However, she goes to Jesus. Now, the response, what we call that is triangulation. That's called, and really that's kind of what we call actually the thing not to do. Jesus shouldn't be in the picture. Jesus shouldn't be in the picture. It's called triangulation. It's called I'm mad at you, you mad at me. So I'm going to go tell my friend over here, and that's going to relieve the pressure. But then I'm going to invite my friend over there to come into the drama. Now, I don't know if we've ever done that before in church or something like that. I don't know if, we have a drama where, we have anger. So somebody's mad at the deacons, then somebody in the trust people says to the deacons, well, why are you doing this? Well, that's triangulation. Did you talk to the pastor? No, you talked to the pastor. Who the issue is with. Exactly. These are the dynamics that we create of triangulation. Now, in pastoral care, they say the first thing you do is stop the triangulation. Actually understand that there's anxiety in the system. There's anxiety with the person, between the people, but there has to be a level of humility and a level of authenticity and a level of honesty. And there has to be honesty in the idea that maybe Martha's afraid to talk to Mary. Maybe Martha, there are reasons, we can go through many reasons why Martha won't talk to Mary. But the issue is, we know who needs to talk to who. And it still ain't Jesus. So what is the right behavior? So what Jesus does is he actually flips the script and tries to redirect the action in their interactions. This is good pastoral care. Because the pastor or the Jesus or the rabbi in this scenario is realizing the conflict is over here. But you're being drawn into the conflict, and the point is actually not to react to the conflict. Now, folks can get mad at you because you didn't react to the conflict. It's like, no, that's not what we're supposed to do. We actually need to realize, oh, you have an issue. You can't articulate the issue. And whose issue is that? It's yours. And so there we see that, well, that's just called, well, that's when you start, after a point when you go through this 3 or 4 or 5 times, this is where you start sending people to counseling, actually, because that's a behavior that needs to then be worked on. But the key thing is that in Martha's anxiety, she is missing the ball on both sides. Because in her obsession to be a good host, or what she thinks is a good host. Because a lot of times, with the anxiety, it's the idea, we get caught up that we believe it should be this way, and then what we think is, okay, the reason why the person isn't doing this is personal. The reason why this is happening, like, ain't nobody thinking about you. The anxiety is created from the lack of self-differentiation. The idea that to know where one begins and one ends. Meaning, you only can control what you can do. Now, if someone asks you to do something you don't want to do it, that's a different story. But you can only control what you can control.
All right.
So then why are you going to lash out, act out, and keep on getting drawn away from the purpose of whatever gathering you're in, whatever relationship you're in? Whether it be a household relationship or a church or any of these things. Because the moment you're worried more about the obsession of who's doing what, you haven't gotten the actual mission done of what actually needs to be done. Whether it's church or if it's the hospitality in the sense of Martha's house. So what I'm saying again is like she, in her obsession to be a good host, she has lost sight of why she was doing all these things in the first place. See, Martha keeps on getting distracted. She keeps on being drawn away. She gets drawn away to go get wine. She's drawn away to cook the food. She's drawn away to set the tables. She's working like a dog. She keeps on being drawn away. Now, the interesting thing about it is that the word that is used for distraction or to be drawn away is the word perspiro, as in perspirate, as in sweat, as the sweat draws the heat from your skin through the water. So the word sweating, she literally is sweating him in this passage. She is being distracted. She is perspiring away. She's being drawn away from what needs to be done. See, what Martha has got caught up in is what's called, I would say, domestic performance. Now, it's interesting that you say, I say domestic performance, but it's perfect that we use the name Martha. Because can you think of a person who is made their money, their lives on performance in the home? There's this lady named Martha Stewart. You know Martha Stewart? Home? She has cookbooks, and what is she? All the things that she does is like if you can basically follow Martha Stewart and you create a whole world in your home with her designs. I can say that Martha is being Martha Stewart, but it's the performance. And I would say, in particular, I would say the domestic performance is that sometimes people get caught in the performance around their lives, around how they think things should be in their homes. Well, this has to be clean. This has to be dirty. This has to be this. This has to be that. Now, knowing that there never is a perfect time in your life, and there's never a perfect time in your home or your family, we look for perfect where perfect becomes the enemy of the good. We're so busy being drawn away to perfection sometimes in our lives that we never realize the good moments. And so Martha, in her domestic performance, in the service performance, what she believes is being a good disciple in terms of being a servant. Because this is connecting, of course, in terms of her understanding of diakonos, the servants is connecting later to Acts, and the servants, the deacons in Acts. So she's a precursor, probably one of the first deacons before ever deacons ever get called. And that's a whole different ballgame. But she has been drawn away from what's important in that moment in the scripture. And the more she is drawn away from the moments in that scripture where she's arguing with her sister about doing all the work herself, the more sweating she does. The more perspiration she does, the more she keeps on getting away from the point of it all. Because the point of in doing hospitality, you actually have to be in relationship with the person. Because in all the hospitality doing, as much as she's setting up the table and everything, she doesn't have a conversation with Jesus except for to complain about her sister. Because in the hospitality doing, she's actually being inhospitable to Jesus. Now, Mary and Jesus are taking a pause for the cause. Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, a metaphor saying that she can learn from him. Now, the radical thing of the moment in this text is, and in the text from last week in terms of the Good Samaritan, is that what Luke is trying to do is reassign the boundaries and expand the boundaries of inclusion of people who are been not counted as important in the Gospels. So, where it's the Samaritan who does all the things right, the Samaritan can be a part of the Christian mission where they were excluded before, in the Samaritan versus Jew dynamic. And then the same thing with the women here. These women, Mary and Martha, these independent women who own their own home and have invited Jesus in, are the first to be called, are some of the first to be called deacons. And let's just be honest, as a rabbi, as Jesus, as a Jewish rabbi, women don't sit at the rabbi's feet. They don't. That's a boundary issue. Women are separate in those senses. But in Jesus doing this, he is choosing and making a decision saying, no, women are equal partners in this Christian mission. So the point of all of it is that, and to be clear about it in terms of Mary, the point is that she's acting the part of a disciple by listening. She's attending to her guests by being an active listener. By listening to her rabbi, that means she's actually a disciple of Christ. And the marginalized people, the Samaritan and these women, are the focus of these stories together because the marginalized people are the people that we are called to be focused on. So the scripture says, choosing the better part. The better part of discipleship is to discern that there is more going on. That discipleship is more than just doing stuff. That we have to be disciplined in our discipleship. That there's a time to go and do, but then there's also a time to listen and reflect. Knowing which and when is a matter of spiritual discernment. But you can't be a good host in any place without listening to the guest. What does the guest value? What did Jesus value? What does Jesus value? Well, we are called to be hearers and doers of the word. We are called to talk the talk and walk the walk. And these are not mutually exclusive, but inclusive and integral parts of the same body. Some might call it, and some do call it, a ministry of presence. Now, some find a ministry of presence is sitting around and doing nothing. But I would say that a ministry of presence is also called solidarity. The ministry of presence is a place where both parties are inviting each other, not just one. The rabbi is invited into the home. The rabbi doesn't show up out of nowhere. There has to be a relationship and connection and an ask, and then opening for a response. We want to do all these things, but we have to have, we want to do, but some people just want to be social justice folks, and that's my word. I'm more of a person who, yes, I'm down with solidarity, I'm down with the being with the peoples. And sometimes then, we also want to be people who are out there doing stuff. But then the social justice that we do is based in the Word of God, and we have to then know our stuff. And we have to also know our brothers and sisters. You see, because when you don't, just like how Martha's being a domestic performer, we become social justice performers. We become Democrats instead of followers of Christ. We become democratic socialists instead of followers of Christ. Now, I argue that democratic socialism is actually closer to what Jesus would want than the Democratic Party. But that's a whole different thing, because that's just a different understanding of politics and understanding. But in Acts, it does talk about how all things are actually given up to the whole for everyone. So, but you have to know your stuff. That's the difference between being a social justice performer and being a social justice advocate Christian. Because when we're in performance, we check off the list. I voted for Obama, cool. I voted against Trump, check. I listened to NPR, okay. I watched The Daily Show, yep. I still watch The Daily Show even though Jon Stewart's not there and now we have the black guy. I like the black guy more, I like Trevor Noah a little better. But we also donate to the right causes. We shop at Target and not Walmart. We shop at Michael's and not Hobby Lobby. We tweet and repost the latest messages on Facebook and Twitter about different drama. But what do we do when Jesus calls us to sit with those who Jesus calls the blessed? Are we willing to be disciples of the poor? Yes, we will make sandwiches for the homeless, but do we listen to their stories? Like I said, are we social justice performers, do-gooders, or are we just, like I said from last week, are we playing church? Because how can you serve someone, how can you love someone, how can you truly say you care for their well-being, but you won't live next to them? See, in these sweaty performances, we are driven to distractions of the next battle sometimes, of the next fight. Not realizing that the wars that we're fighting, the wars against racism, the war against homophobia, the wars against injustice, the wars are all around us. It's at home and it's abroad. The racism that plays out in our country plays out with badges and batons, and it plays out in the streets with badges and batons, but also plays out with drones and bombs in the sands. Racism is playing out in our country in the concentration camps, and yes, that's what they are, on the border. In these sweaty performances, we are driven to the distraction of the next battle instead of discerning divine direction. So if we are not disciplined in our discipleship, we will continue to do drive-by theology and do drive-by and band-aid prayers, where sometimes we need to take the road that Mary took and choose the better part that Mary chooses. Choosing the better part is the presence in discipleship. Choosing the better part is the authentic concern of our brothers and sisters. But sometimes we need to choose the better part and sit down and be real.
Amen.
Be authentic. Because true hospitality has nothing to do with the quality of food that you serve, and all to do with the quality of time you spent. The word used to describe the quality of relational authenticity is the word that I mentioned before, solidarity. Now, solidarity can mean many things, but it means more than anything else, sitting down. Sitting down and being present. And now that might be sitting down in front of a bus or in the front of a bus. It could be sitting down at a lunch counter. Solidarity can mean also sitting down in front of a police station. Sitting down can mean sitting in front of an ICE detention facility. Solidarity can mean sitting down wherever injustice may be. But more than anything else, solidarity is sitting down and listening to one another. One another. Acknowledging the anxiety, acknowledging the fear, acknowledging all the feelings that are inside that have continued to bubble up and cause the rifts in our lives, the rifts in our churches, the rifts in our families, because we are triangulating instead of going one-on-one and having those conversations. Yes, we may believe that having the third party relieves the tension, but it just puts together a situation for swing back of triangulation. So then everything goes through Jesus in this conversation of Mary and Martha instead of it going between those two family members who need to work it out. It's more, it's beyond all of that. It's about the humility and the authenticity to be real with one another. And if we don't keep it real, if we don't actually move in the way that says, let me listen, let me hear, then we never get anywhere. Solidarity is not sweating the small stuff and putting the sweat and the sweat equity into the relationship building pieces that say, I value you. And that has to be the statement that you say first before anyone else. It's not about waiting to say, well, I'm waiting for him to be the bigger person. No. You are the bigger person. Let's handle it. You don't need a mediator for the drama that you cause yourself. But if you don't want to recognize the drama that you've caused, if you don't want to recognize the dynamics that already existed beforehand, if you don't want to recognize and you don't want to be authentic, the cycle will continue, no matter who it is, no matter who's in what position. There will always be a new triangle. There will always be a new dynamic that is unhealthy. Because the healthiness has to do with the individual themselves. Why do you have the anxiety? Why are you continuously drawn away from the issues that need to be tended to? Why is there a conflict of dynamics? So much sweat is wasted when we refuse to listen to Jesus.
Yes.
So much sweat is wasted when we refuse to listen to reason. So much sweat is wasted when we refuse to ever listen to God or to discern the policy, the procedures, whatever you want to do in God's sight. Because God is the one who's supposed to order our steps. And we're called to follow. But if we won't follow, we have triangles of dynamics of distraction and destruction instead of sweat that goes somewhere. So I invite you this morning to Take time for yourself. Take time to think about all the interactions in your family lives, all the different places that you work, or and if you're in the conflict at some point, what part of me is in there? What part of you is in there? Is it, where is the anxiety coming from? And how can it be resolved before it ever comes out of my side? How can we work and live where God's voice is the deciding factor around how we live and act? Go forth this day. Not playing church, not sweating the small stuff, but living in solidarity, living in relational authenticity, living and keeping it just good old-fashioned real with your neighbor as yourself. When we do those things, God's with us anyway, but we are blessed, and we will be immensely led forward by the path that God chooses us to go. Amen. Amen.